All right. Welcome, LinkedIn friends and followers. My name is Nick. We're just going to get the show kicked off in a couple of minutes here. With me today is Anca Trifan of Tree-fan Events, technical producer based in Idaho, Boise.
I was gonna say, okay, let's see if he remembers.
Sorry, I feel like I've listened to your podcast enough at this point that I could probably do your whole intro, but
There you go.
no. So Anca and I are going to be talking about agency versus in-house today. We're going to start that conversation in a couple of minutes, but as we're all kind of like getting situated here, we just wanted to share some of our favorite behind the scenes event stories. So Anca, why don't you kick us off? Tell me something. Tell me about an event that you've experienced that people should know about.
Okay, so first off, this is not gonna be your probably event that you go to, because I wanted to make it more like fun. And honestly, I feel like we do so many events that at the end of the day, most of them they kind of like disappear into this fog memory of events that we've done over the years. But there's one event that I've done many years ago that still stays like in my memory because it was just there was like something so much like crazy outrageous, like when everything goes wrong that could possibly go wrong. I feel like those are the events that we remember the most. So I'm gonna profess with the fact that the person that we did this event for is no longer with us, rest in peace. So I feel like I have the liberty to maybe make it a bigger deal than what it really was. So it was a fashion designer that we were working for. At the time, I was working with a production company back in Southern California, and we were doing all the runaway shows for this particular fashion designer. And for his 50th bash, he had this tremendous, imaginary desire of what an event it should be, and he had multiple events planned throughout the evening in different places in LA, and all of those were at destinations and places that for a fashion designer you think like celebrities type of fashion designer, this was going to be top-notch event, the event that every celebrity in LA was going to come to. So we were at Peterson Museum, on top of the Peterson Museum, and we were setting up this 100 by 100 or something huge, humongous tent. And then it had multiple tents leading to the main tent, and each tent had a different theme. However, the piece of resistance was the statue of him, of about 25-foot tall statue of him, like naked. And it was white and it was beautiful, made out of marble. It was heavy as heck, and we needed to take this whole thing up through the parking lot and up to the top of Peterson Museum. And I wasn't involved in the process because at this point I'm just like, I don't want to have anything to do with that because it sounds painful. But the guys that I was working with, especially the entire lighting crew, needed to make this happen. So as they were trying to figure out, I mean, we're not in the business of moving statues, marble statues for that reason. Like, right? We're in the business of creating the decor, lighting, the bringing in the PA, the bands, mixing the sound and projection, all the things, but moving statues up to a museum floor. So we did. However, in the process, they managed somehow to ding it and shove it, and we lost the package. The main package of what this statue is supposed to showcase. And here
When you say package,
I am talking about the one thing that a man cares about. If you're gonna have a naked statue of yourself, what do you want people to be, fixated on, right?
Sure.
So
Okay,
here we are, top of the museum, and we're like, what happened? We cannot show something is missing. It's very evident that something is missing, and we have to make this happen, work it out, tape it, glue it, like whatever it takes. But this cannot be put on display the way it looks right now. We can't put a skirt around it either, right?
Oh my
So
God.
one of those things where you're like, why did we sign up for this? Like, whose idea was it that it
Yeah.
is our responsibility as the AV production company to take care of this part of the event? Because this is totally insane, you know? So
Hmm.
it still stays super like vivid in my memory because it was just so funny. We managed to figure out, I mean, I wasn't part of that whole crew of repair crew, but it was just hilarious. Like in the moment you don't know if you're gonna cry or you're gonna laugh, like which one is the appropriate response, you know?
Yep, yep. Oh my God, that is amazing. And, like totally makes sense, right? Because AV folks are just entrusted to do everything, right? Like it doesn't matter, like people come to us because they don't know how to run an event and they don't know the myriad complexities that go into it. And they see you as like a strong, capable person and they're like, okay, you figure it out, right? And sometimes that means like moving a statue or hot gluing a package back onto a sculpture, whatever the
I'm
case may be.
telling you, sometimes there should be some boundaries
Oh my
around
God.
this.
All right. All right. Speaking of boundaries, I think that is that is about the limit that we can get into for our pre-show. So we're going to kick off our show here in just a second, and then we're going to get into this conversation around in-house versus agency. Welcome back to our show.
We're back.
So today we are talking about in-house versus agency production, and this was a big topic of conversation last week on LinkedIn with all of us. What what I think we are struggling with in the events world is figuring out who is supposed to do what. Now, over the last few years, we have event producers have developed experience and expertise in virtual and hybrid events. So there are a few of us who really know what we're doing when it comes to creating an in-person experience and at the same time creating a virtual experience that matches the energy of the audiences, that makes sure that everyone feels like they're welcome and trusted and a part of the experience. Uh, a challenge that people are seeing, though, is now that they're back in person, now that we're going to hotels, who is responsible for sending the audio to your virtual stream? Who is responsible for like deciding which cameras are up? So we're going to have a conversation around this. With me today is Anca Trifan of Tree-fan Events, who I have just learned has actually worked both sides of this. So we will probably watch her argue against herself for a good portion of the day here. But Anka, I think my first question for you is when now that brands are coming back and they're creating in-person events, should they be hiring someone in-house, a full-time person to oversee those events? Or does it make sense to trust an external partner? What are your thoughts on that?
I feel like you just opened the can of worms right from the gate, Nick. I mean, this is certainly the debate of the century in our world because at the end of the day, you could technically go either way, right?
Mhm.
Depends on very much on your event, depends very much on your resources, depends very much on maybe even location where you're at and which part of the country, the world you're doing this. So for the sake of sort of like reining it in within some type of a boundaries of what me and you are maybe used to seeing, I'm just going to refer to some of my experience because I can't speak for all the events out there. I can't speak for all the venues and all the locations. There's way too many variables to give an overall all encompassing type of a response that might not solve any anybody's problem. So when I think of a in-house technical event specialist, in most cases, I think of a professional who is employed either by an organization or a venue to oversee and manage the technical aspects of an event, someone that is most likely a generalist, as their main responsibility is to coordinate various technical details, such as audiovisual setup, lighting, staging, and other event production elements. Now, because they're a generalist, then that means they understand what it takes for the most part to put on an event. Depends on the venue and depends where you're at, right? You could be doing events that in most cases are maybe, I don't know, up to 1,000 people, and you never touch on large events that go into thousands of attendee members with thousands of details and pages upon pages of run of shows and logistics, right? So it very much varies. When I first started my agency, I remember I like to call myself a technical event planner for the event planner. And I was in so many ways filling the role of this technical event specialist as a third party technical event planner whose main job was to work closely with event organizers and clients to understand their technical needs and ensure that the event's technical requirements were met.
Mhm.
Now, while I work closely with AV equipment, my main role in the AV world at the time was as a sound engineer. So I could troubleshoot any technical issues related to sound, but I did not have much experience at the time when it comes to like video production.
Mhm.
So I could speak to it, but if I were put on the spot to troubleshoot something the day of because something was like, going up in flames, I didn't have the expertise to do that. So a lot of the, technical event specialists that you're going to meet in those capacities are at that stage. They could talk the talk, but they don't
Mhm.
always walk the walk because they don't have the experience. They don't have the hours behind, the
Yeah.
mixing board, the video switcher, or whatever it is to give you that expertise. So
Yeah.
during COVID, I remember obviously we all had to pivot, we all have to change tracks and do the best with what we had. So for me, video production became like a very important element to
Mhm.
learn and pour as much time into it as possible. And sometimes I even put myself like in very uncomfortable roles, like where I'm learning the hard way, some hard
Yeah.
lessons, and it's painful, but it put me in a position where now I can go on site, and I can fill a V1 role and
Mhm.
not sweat. But
Yeah.
at the time, I was sweating buckets. I'm like,
Oh,
what
yes.
am I doing? Like, I don't
Yep.
understand what's happening right now. So, just building that experience, I feel like it's so important. So, whoever
Yep.
you're working with, make sure that not only can they talk general AV concepts, but they can
Mhm.
actually work those concepts into
Yes.
practice.
Yeah. And we talk a lot internally about building the plane while we're flying it, which often is what happens when you are running an event, right? So there's always stuff to figure out, and you really need someone with the breadth of experience who knows what all of those things are, what all of those potential traps are, so that they can troubleshoot them before they appear as a problem. I think in my experience, it makes sense to have someone internal if you have a program that you run consistently, quarterly, something like that, um, to handle the brand side of representation, to handle the audience interaction, that kind of stuff. But you shouldn't necessarily expect that person to be a technical wizard. Um, they don't necessarily need to have that background in audiovisual or video production, and certainly don't ask them with to do that, because when you do, it's taking them away from what they really should be focused on, which is the success of the event, whatever KPIs you use to determine what that success metric is. I think the other reason to consider an agency over, or to work in collaboration with in-house is just the volume of, or the not the volume necessarily, but the exposure that we get to a lot of different types of events, gives us this kind of well-rounded knowledge. Whereas if you when you hire someone internal, they're going to do the same event over and over and over again. But folks like Anca, folks like myself, or the team at Mainstream, we're doing dozens, scores of events every year. We're seeing a lot of different types of things, not just at the same venue, but like, across the country. So we carry some of that knowledge with us to every new event, and then we're able to apply that directly.
And to add to that a little bit, I feel like it's not just the knowledge, but also which tribal knowledge is important, especially when you walk into a venue that potentially you have not worked in before, but also the partners that you
Hmm.
build with some of the key players within that location, within that geographical place that you're going to. For me, that's super important, because not only am I relying on my experience and my knowledge and expertise on navigating some challenges that come, with planning large scale events in places that I haven't before, but
Hmm.
I have the partners that I know that they have my back.
Hmm.
Because let me tell you, there's nothing worse than showing up somewhere and thinking that you have someone on your side, like an AV
Hmm.
vendor, an AV partner that is there to support you, only to realize that no, they couldn't care less if your event goes well or doesn't. And that will hurt your bottom line. You'll hurt
Yeah.
you in long term,
Hmm.
especially with that client that you establish rapport. Like, it damages the relationship. So I've learned the hard way, even if, this whatever AV vendor might be top
Hmm.
of the line, if you don't have a pre-established relationship with them where you know that they're there to support you,
Hmm.
then they might not be the right place for them to get them involved.
Yeah, I want to talk more about in-house AV, because I think this is actually a good segue for this. So, you know, there is frequently a conversation between internal versus external, right? When you go to a venue has its list of preferred vendors. Sometimes they have their own in-house vendors who are literally on site, and in some instances, it makes sense to leverage that staff, but it doesn't always, right? And I think that, something that we were talking about in our kind of pre-show was how, if you have an event at a venue, good friggin' luck trying to get a hold of your point of contact, like if you're a week out from your event, because they have 7 shows, for the 7 days prior to you, and they're just prioritizing what is right in front of them. um,
Exactly.
you know so, but you've actually, you've worked in venues before, you've worked kind of on both sides of this. So, and I don't want to just like disparage our friends who are working in the hotels. So, like, what are situations that you see where it makes sense to leverage that in-house AV?
I think in most cases, and this is a very important question that you raised, I think in most cases, it's important to note that most in-house AV teams have typically a more general, well-rounded tech role expertise rather than a specialized expertise in the event production world. And for myself, I've worked with some amazing, good intentioned AV techs. But the in-house AV was there breaking into the AV world place, right? So they're very much green rookies, like level, like knowledge, not zero, but kind of like very close to zero, right? So they're learning from the bottom up. It's like I
Hmm.
would have a team of guys that I would train for the in-house, overall support, and those were coverage guys, right? So
Hmm.
I would have them, and I'm sorry I use the term guys because I'm very sensitive to that, because during that time of my life it was only guys, like
Hmm.
literally I was the only girl and I was teaching these guys. Now I would have
Hmm.
loved to have some gals around. So during that time, like, they were learning from the ground up, like how to set up PA, how to ring a room, how to set up even a fast full screen, like, oh, by the way, this is different than your cradle screen. I'm like, I mean, minimum level of understanding, right? So
Hmm.
when does it make sense? I'm not saying that all in-house AVs have that level of expertise, because I've worked with some AV teams that really come from the event production side. But there is a level of difference between in-house AV,
Hmm.
general AV, versus event production AV, right? When in
Hmm.
the real world, when we talk about event productions, we talk about way more than just sound, screens, mics, and
Hmm.
cables run this way or that way, or which placement is the screen gonna take, right?
Hmm.
So it's important to keep in mind that there is that difference. But also when it comes to the load, like of how much you do, a lot of the venues, they do, small events that every so often they would have a large event.
Hmm.
Then they will put in their lead roles, some more of their expert, either if they have it on the payroll or maybe freelancers that they work with. But for the most part, you just go from event to event to event, that you're just going to set up screens and speakers and a mic.
Hmm.
And maybe, now that we have virtual, we're going to have to stream this to Zoom or something, right? So
Hmm.
there is a lot of like back to back to back to back. I'm just going to have to get this nailed and cross it off my list, because tomorrow I have another list of to-do list and another list of to-do lists, because it's all fed by BO, right? So whatever comes to us in the office, it has to be accomplished by the end of the
Hmm.
day. There is no urgency to make this one event more special than the other event,
That's right.
because at the end of the day, it's about getting it done.
Yep.
Now, how
Hmm.
much time do you think I have to spend and spare on this one event to make it just an extra notch more
Hmm.
special? Not a lot, because
Hmm.
I'm thinking, oh, I've got another 5 different ballrooms that I need to set,
Yep.
and I'm one person and I gotta run, 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 right? So
Hmm.
it happens a lot where there's not enough labor, right? Assigned hands to take care of all the incoming that is happening at
Hmm.
a venue level. So then there's this one person like sweating buckets, it's just running from place to place to
Yeah.
get it done. And maybe if there's something to troubleshoot in this one ballroom, they might be able to come and help you, or hold off until I am actually free because I'm doing something else that's more of a priority, right? So
Yep.
going back to what you say about communication, yeah, like good luck getting on the line this one person that's running
Yes.
from ballroom to ballroom, setting up to their schedule what it needs to be set up for the day
Hmm.
of, because they don't have time, like literally they don't have time. And you
Well,
have to have a compassion for that, empathy, but also figure out a different solution for yourself if
yeah.
straight up communication is important to you.
Well, and not only do they maybe not have enough time, but they actually may not be physically present.
Yeah,
I had
exactly.
I had a conversation with a producer recently who had taken a job working hotel AV, and he was a director of event technology at a local hotel, and within a couple of weeks, he was the director of event technology at 5 hotels, because that's what was owned by by that hotel group. And the vendors, the AV staff are so understaffed that they're literally splitting people across their entire hotel group. So
Yeah,
he's having to do you know the job of 5 people at 5 different spaces, and consider all of that. And I think at the end of the day, when you have that level of stress, when you have that level that workload, it can be really challenging to commit yourself fully to the experience of one show and one audience. And
yeah,
I think that that's the thing that kind of drives me in the industry. And I was talking to another producer, AJ, last night, who it's the same thing. Like, when we take on a show, you commit yourself to the show. You're going to do everything you can to make that show great. And that's, I think, the mindset of an external agency, as opposed to an in-house vendor, where like they're going to show up to the office, they're going to work their 12-hour day, and then they're going to go home, sleep, and wash, rinse, repeat until they get burnt out
yeah.
you know
There is this very actually interesting conversation that I had with another small business owner of an agency in Vegas. And we were actually talking about this exact point where we, as an agency, and we're not a large agency, like for me, it's important if I
Hmm.
do an event right, or if I mess up on an event and I lose it, right? It's very important. It's not like I have this a never ending pipeline of events coming and hitting
Hmm.
me from all sides, where I can afford to just not be careful with the execution of any given event, right? So we were talking about how when you're in the position of running an agency, every event is important, because that's
Hmm.
what makes your brand and sets you apart from the competition, but also it's what builds your business.
Hmm.
I can afford to be a global organization like someone that I'm not going to mention the name of,
Hmm.
and be like, well, if we've aft on this event, who cares, like move on.
Right. Yeah.
They
We
don't
got.
have another
Yeah.
choice.
Right.
They either have to come back to us and
Hmm.
we'll figure out how we're gonna amend, or they're gonna bring in somebody else and then we're gonna have to give them some cuts and figure it out, right? But for us,
Right.
that's not the end of our life. Like, it's
Yeah.
not gonna impact us financially so
Exactly.
big.
It's not money out of their pocket, right? Whereas like if you or me mess up something real big, then we're gonna have to eat the cost of that in
Was
some
there
way.
implication, the brand implication, the future client
Yep.
implication? It's like a lot of things are in the balance.
Hmm.
So it matters to me that I give my all to this one event today and another event tomorrow, or
Yep.
whatever it is that's coming. It's on my schedule. Everything is important. It's not just, oh, this is more important than the other one because actually it has a bigger, I don't know, budget or
Hmm.
whatever.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, I'm gonna hop ahead here because I think that we are this conversation is great and I want to keep it going. I think we could talk about it all day, but at some point I have to get lunch because I'm on the East Coast. So
What you eat? I thought
uh,
you had pancakes in the morning.
I did, yeah, that is true. I did eat delicious pancakes, but it's time for my afternoon
Your
pancakes.
Friday pancakes with Nick Bacon. If you have not checked that out, you should,
That's
because I'm every so often I'm thinking, man, I should make myself some pancakes on Fridays.
yep. Stay tuned because pretty soon I'm going to drop the recipe, and then the world's going to change.
There you go.
Well, the last question that I really want to talk about today is collaboration. Is around
Hmm.
collaboration because at the end of the day, like the client has to decide what's best for their show, and often that means that there's we're going to use the venue in some capacity. You're going to use your external folks in some capacity. You're going to have in-house specialists who are working on things. So like what tips do you have for folks who need to collaborate with all of these disparate groups? How do you get those groups to come together to create an exceptional event?
It goes back to communication. I feel like when it comes to event planning, stellar communication has to be part of that recipe.
Hmm.
There is no event without being able to get everyone on the same page and being able to communicate your needs. Also, what is it that you're looking for? What's the vision for the event? What's your expectation? The budget, like all the things that make an event work. And also some of the responsibilities, like also who's point of contact the day of the event. Like, let's not forget that, because many times you work with one person when it comes to the pre-event planning, and then you're like, okay, so who's going to be there the day of? Because that one person, are you sure they're being dialed in with everything that we've talked so far, right? It's
Hmm.
important to have that understanding and transparency in the communication process, so that okay, this is what are the specific requirements, and this is who's going to meet them, and this is who's going to be responsible for it, who's going to handle communication when it comes to the updates during the event production timeline, who's going to provide regular progress reports, or maybe project management systems having been set in place to give you updates. All of those things go to stellar communication so that
Hmm.
collaboration can happen. And for agency like us, having a relationship with the partners that we work with and bring in, that is also very, very important, because like I said earlier, not having a good relationship in the sense of knowing that they have your back. And for me, loyalty, respect, having my back are super important, as far as when it comes to decision making, who's going to be joining on my event.
Hmm.
And of course, expertise. It's important to have expertise, but you can have the best expertise, but if you're an asshole, let me tell you, that's not going to go too far. So
Yeah,
it
yeah. Word gets
matters.
out pretty quick, like who you
Right.
should and shouldn't work with.
Exactly. So for me,
Hmm.
it's important to have those, and most important, again, aside from clear roles, responsibilities, that
Hmm.
regular communication for the coordination of the event, so then we can collaborate and plan this event and
Hmm.
know also who are the decision makers and who's there to make the hard calls when those calls need to be made, and
Yeah.
leveraging expertise that's available. All of those things are important ingredients to create that
Yeah.
experience, the event that you're looking to have.
I think that you've touched on something really powerful there, which is about like who the decision makers are. And a lot of times, if you're not really thoughtful about this, a lot of times it can feel like you are in competition when you're working on a show, right? Like you have your AV folks over here, and like they better not drop the ball because I got my stream over here, and like they're responsible for for all this stuff. And and that's just no way to run an event, right? I
That's what I mean when I say, do you have my back? Because if I'm
exactly.
here streaming this event and you need to feed me the audio, which is, has to be clear, the
Hmm.
video, the graphics, the camera angles,
Hmm.
as we're communicating to make this pancake, to make sure that all the, layers are put on right.
Hmm.
uh, if I don't have someone that's there to
Hmm.
support me, then we're, like you said, we're not only competing, but it becomes this struggle, power struggle of like, who is better than the other? And like,
Yeah.
no, we're here to work for the benefit of this one client. And there is none of that. Because
Yep.
if there's any sense of that,
Hmm.
that turns me off so bad.
Oh yeah. Something that I've started doing in the last year is I actually will at the at the start of our load in day, I will gather everybody from all of the teams. I'll gather the in-house AV, I will gather everyone that's on my team, I will gather the client, every single person, and get them to stand in a circle and get them to say who their name, like what their name is and what their job is on site. And just doing that, just that initial kickoff of like, okay, if I need audio, then this is the person that I'm going to go to. If I need video, like it's got to go over here.
Yeah.
Just establishing that at the very beginning really sets the tone for a collaborative experience with the entire organization. So
Yeah.
I've started doing that, and I know that like some I get a lot of eye rolls because I literally do the name game. I'm like, you have to, you say your name, you say the name of the person before you say what their job is doing, and we'll do that with like 40 people, and it
Yeah.
takes a minute,
Yeah.
but uh, but it works. Everybody remembers everyone's job.
Is,
Um,
yeah, and especially on large scale events, this is so important, as you just mentioned, because, like, for example, I've worked on large events where we had over 300, 400, crew members, and many of those were hired locally from,
mhm,
Yahtzee or labor union. So you had no knowing of their capacity, of their skill set level. I mean, there's just a group of people that is there to support an event, and some are better than others, right? So like creating opportunities where they know who the lead is, where they know where to ask question, and they know what the hierarchy is, so that not
mhm,
everything comes to this one person, when it can be solved, at the level of where they're maybe ballroom level. Like you have your leads for your ballroom, and then you have a lead for the floor that we're working on, then maybe escalate to me, if we need to go that far.
mhm,
But it's, yeah, that communication, collaboration, and also understanding that some people are better than others in certain roles. So like between yourselves, like feel free to, without obviously bragging and pushing and shoving, like feel free to say, hey, I'm really good at setting cameras, like that's
mhm.
what I'm going to focus on, because I don't know, like from where I'm at, should I put you to set up audio? And you're like, fuck, I've never actually set up audio in my life. Like, what am I? But
Yeah,
I'm not gonna embarrass myself, so I'm gonna figure it out. But how much longer will that take you when I can just put someone that's actually an A1, in that
exactly.
position?
Yep, yep.
I think
Let
we can go
people.
on to this forever. So
I
yeah.
know, I know. No, that's good. We're getting some good questions in from the LinkedIn family. So one question is: my clients often hesitate to bring in an agency like ours because they fear pricing from outside AV outweighs the in-house options significantly. Do you also experience clients facing this fear? Um, and I'll say from the start that, like, budget is always a conversation, right? You have to operate within, within what's reasonable for you and what's reasonable for them. And not every budget is going to fit, your ability to do a job. That's okay. If we got a special guest, Anka, that's totally
I know.
fine.
I'm like,
It's all good.
do you see it on my face?
That's all right. That's all right. Well, this is a family show.
Yes.
Maybe not earlier, but now it is. But listen, so you have to be mindful of budget,
Yeah.
and I think that it's okay to say, like, listen, we're not going to be able to make this work. Now, that said, just because you're bringing in someone externally doesn't mean it's more expensive. A lot of times with external vendors, they have more flexibility with
Yep.
budgeting, so that they can figure something out, right? Like maybe their gear is more modern,
Yeah.
or is a different kind of package. Um, maybe they have different levels of people that they can bring in. So I think that there are spaces like that where where it ends up being pretty close.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. What's your experience with budget? How do you handle that conversation?
Well, I definitely understand the fear per se, right? But at the end of the day, also let's not forget that many in-house AV teams usually do include a service charge, which ranges anywhere from 20 to 30%. Like, do you, do you put that within your budget? So instead of maybe putting that to this service charge fee that is going to be added to your bill, regardless if you like it or not, how about you allocate that budget for the outsource partners that can offer more flexibility in cost negotiations, might have a lower overhead. That is something to keep in mind, which in most cases will result in cost savings for the event. And then another thing that I've actually experienced myself, I was working an event, a large conference in on the East Coast, and we had a range of ballrooms that needed support. So we decided to hire the in-house AV to do the breakouts, which was
Mhm.
all these ballrooms. And then the general session was an AV production company, a separate third-party AV production partner that was going to support that. Let me tell you, at the end of the day, by the time we were done with the cost and the analysis of what went where and how much money we spent so much money on the in-house, constantly needing to bring in extra people from different venues,
Mhm.
constantly needing to bring extra equipment that they didn't realize they need. I'm like, it was on the on the production schedule. What are you
Right.
talking about? Now I need to pay for the fee of you transporting equipment in between venues. And then also
Mhm.
one person doing the job, at a high level capacity is not the same as five people on the payroll doing the same job.
Yep.
Because then we just had to pay for all this extra labor to do the same thing that one of my production guys was like, get it done, get it done, get it done, right? And I'm like, I'm just paying all this extra money for the in-house,
Mhm.
where I could have actually, this could have been savings if I would have had a more expert crew, a more
Mhm.
organized, project manager, which was, from the
Mhm.
venue side. And it just was a headache. And I'm
Yeah.
like, lesson learned.
Yep.
Let's look at this differently next year.
Yeah, it's kind of like, thinking about a general contractor. If you're building a house, right? Like, can you hire the crew that's going to put in your windows and do your roofing and do the plumbing? Can you individually yourself as a homeowner hire the folks to do that? Absolutely. Do you have the experience to do it? If you don't, then, like, maybe you need someone who can actually handle that stuff, who's made those decisions before and can project manage the situation appropriately.
Absolutely. I love Jared. He says something. Oh,
Hmm.
yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. It's like
Hmm.
how he loves to, from the get go say, we are here to work together and we are friends, not enemies. And I'm
Hmm.
such a proponent of that as well. I want the in house to be on my side, right? So I
Absolutely.
don't want them to be putting, shoving like all kinds of obstacles in my way just because I'm being, a bit of a bitch. I want them to be on my side.
Yeah.
However, I'm also going to keep some strict boundaries as to what's acceptable, as to what's not, how long things should take to be done. Like, if we're waiting for a ballroom to be set and it takes you 10 hours when it
Hmm.
should have been done in 4 hours, That's not acceptable in my book. And I'm going to tell you. And it
Mhm.
might not be something that you're going to like in a moment, but I promise you, I'm also going to be your best friend by the end of the 3-day show,
Yeah.
because I'm going to bring you coffees and cookies and all the things just to, make sure that we're good. Like,
Yeah.
yes, I'm not someone that is just going to let those things fly, but I want to be proactive, looking at what we got ahead of us, and make this happen for the benefit of the client without, having to like punch each other in the face by the end of the day.
Which I mean is going to happen at some point on some show. Someone is going to punch you in the face. Uh,
It
you know.
hasn't happened yet, but maybe I
Uh,
was close at one point.
yeah. All right. I want to hear that story the next time we do this. Stories of
I
getting
know
punched in the
that
face.
that is left for my book. That's gonna hopefully come out at the end of the year. So we'll see what
Oh,
happens.
okay. Nice. We got a book drop coming up. That's exciting.
Let's do it.
All
Yes. Oh
right.
my gosh. Trust me. Time for it is like, ah.
Yeah, I know you don't have enough on your plate already.
Yeah,
John over at Nimble Media, at Nimble Digital, thinks the general contractor
yeah,
analogy is a good one, which I
totally.
appreciate because I just pulled that out of my butt just now. So, I'm glad it resonated with you. But yeah, so I mean, let's kind of wrap this up here. Final thoughts about in-house versus agency. um, Anka, if there's one piece of advice that you want to give to folks who's watching, what should they be looking out for? What do you want people to take away from this?
I think the main takeaway is, obviously you have to consider the experience and the expertise of the teams that you're working with. And in-house AV teams may, have had certain challenges to get hours and expertise during the pandemic, which is not that far behind, because let me tell you, working 3 hours, 3 years in virtual slash hybrid slash go back to virtual, it will give you a type of expertise, knowledge, skill set that being laid off, it just won't. Like,
Hmm.
that's the reality. Now, there's definitely some potential gaps that they might have had during that time. Not all teams are the same. Some of them, maybe they did work freelancing jobs on the side. So now when they came back to in-house, they're able to bring with them what they've learned. However, in my experience, outsourced AV production partners that still stayed around and worked, during the pandemic, during the craziness that was, most likely have accumulated the experience, the extensive experience and expertise in hosting not just virtual but also hybrid events, and it made them well equipped to handle the complexities that a lot of those events now have. A lot of the clients that I work with now, they have only put on virtual events during pandemic, and now they're completely like unprepared to
Mm.
what hybrid looks. So that's where we get to, uh, showcase the experience that we built over the pandemic, because not only did we do events pre-pandemic, but also we weren't just being still and figure out like I'm gonna go and sell cars during pandemic or something. We
Some of
worked
us did,
it.
and there's nothing wrong with that.
There's
But
nothing wrong with that. But
yeah,
what I'm saying is, selling cars, yeah, sure, it might have helped my sales skill set,
there you go.
but not your technical per se
Yes,
skill set, right? So
yes,
it's important to take those things into considerations, just to throw it out there.
yeah,
And there's so many other things, obviously wanting to evaluate the technology capabilities, what are the cost considerations, specialization, expertise, relationship with that particular vendor. All of those are important in the decision making,
hmm,
when it comes to making your informed decision and asking questions, like making sure that you see those virtual events execution that now we have lots of YouTube streams to show for, right? Like, look at those, like, do some research for yourself. Don't just jump into it because somebody said that this might be the right fit for you.
hmm, hmm, absolutely. Yeah, I think really hammering on the expertise of your external folks, that's definitely a key takeaway. And I think the thing that I'm really hearing about this, from this conversation, is communication. It is possible to have a great event when you communicate upfront, when people know who's responsible, when you physically identify the key stakeholders and the decision makers, and people know where to go to if they need help. But if you're skipping that step, then you're going to have a bad time. So, you know, take the extra hour in advance to just like set yourself up for success.
Yeah.
I think that's my big takeaway.
I mean, having a bad time versus having to pay out of your pocket thousands of dollars for the bad time.
Well, I would call that a bad time.
You know, that's a bad, yeah, that's pretty bad time.
That's
so
a real bad time.
we want to avoid that.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Anca, thank you so much for joining me today for this conversation. Really appreciate it. And I hope we get to do this again sometime soon.
Yeah, this was fun. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I hope that we, you know, at least I know it was Fast and Furious and I might have dropped a few F-bombs. Sorry.
I only counted 2. So we're still in the PG-13.
I was trying to be containing myself here, but don't get me started talking passionate about something that I care, because I mean things will just fly. Okay,
you want a bunch of people to talk, you're gonna get a couple of F-bombs. You're gonna have to deal with that.
You don't want to know what's happening behind the scenes. So this was actually the really tame version. Okay.
That's right. Cool. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll do this again sometime very soon. So until next time, I'm Nick. And I'm with Mainstream.